Good afternoon, Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice. Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood.
How are you,
here.
ma'am? How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Chief Justice. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good afternoon also to the Honourable Commissioners this afternoon. Thank you for having me here.
Afternoon.
You have been, I'm missing my notes now. For how many years have you been a member of the bar?
It's been 15 years at the Cape Bar, Chief Justice.
And how much practical experience in all do you have?
I have had a considerable amount. I have been working in the legal profession. This is my 22nd year, Chief Justice. I've had a broad variety of exposure, training, experience. First, I started training as a candidate attorney, worked in a private law firm for 5 years. I worked as a candidate attorney and then as an attorney. That includes the 5 years includes the candidate attorney and attorneys. In that time, I had a very practical role. I appeared in the magistrates' courts, in the labor court. In those days, I used to brief counsel to appear in the High Court. I used to appear as well in quasi-judicial bodies, CCMA, bargaining councils, disciplinary proceedings. Then I took a year out and I trained as a pupil at the Cape Bar. And I started practicing, and as I said, I've been there for 15 years now. In that time at the bar.
Yeah. Well, I am particularly interested in your membership of the Honourable Society of the Middle Temple. How did you get there?
Yes.
And also the Bar of England and Wales. Just tell me, how did you get there? What is required? What does it mean?
In the UK, they do things differently from us. So how it came about, to answer your first question, is my husband and I had a personal tragedy. We lost our daughter. And after burying her, a few months after burying her, I needed rest from practice. He, at the same time, obtained an opportunity to go and work in Wales and assist some churches in Wales. However, his work opportunity did not have a defined time frame. We knew we were coming back to South Africa. So, for example, I sublet my chambers, knowing I was coming back. I just didn't know how long for. And I knew that when I was finished with resting, I would want to work, and I would only want to work at the bar. So I made inquiries in the UK about what it would take, and I was told I would have to write the bar exam, which is what I did. That's how that came about. And so in the UK, you write the bar exam. Only once you pass that, then you can apply to become a member of the bar, and you have to join an inn. That's how the Honourable Society of the Middle Temple comes in. And only thereafter may you undertake pupillage and then work as well. As I said in my application form, I didn't get to work in the UK because about a week before I got my results from the bar, and I passed, by the way, my husband's work was finished, and I knew we were coming back. And so I didn't practice in the UK, but in fact, I was admitted into that bar while I was acting in the Western Cape High Court already. I was admitted in absentia.
And you've acted as a judge here?
Correct.
For how long, more or less?
I've finished 2 terms. I'm now in my 3rd term, Chief Justice.
And was it ever a challenge for you to produce a judgment within the expected timeframes?
No, not at all, Chief Justice. The longest I've taken in producing a judgment is 7 weeks, by my reckoning.
So you're ready, you would say. That's why you're here.
I'm ready, Chief Justice.
Now, just very quickly, the reports I have received, even from some women who are senior counsel, particularly black, where that is still very difficult to survive at the bar, at least for some of them. How did you manage to survive?
Life at the bar is hard for most people, but most especially for black people, but most especially, if there's another category for most, for African women at the Cape Bar. There have been measures, positive measures taken towards transformation, certainly since I've arrived at the Cape Bar, but not nearly enough, and the numbers speak for themselves. Briefs-wise, most of my briefs come from the state attorney. We're talking 98, 99% of my briefs. The rest of the percentage comes from private firms who brief me about once every 3 years or so, or from law centers. Private firms remain reluctant to brief black people, and especially African people, and most especially African females. The Cape Bar is not immune from our history in our country and the dynamics of the Western Cape. So there is racism at the Cape Bar. There is sexism at the Cape Bar. And for me as an African person, there's a trifecta of being an African person. I want to say there are people as well who take transformation seriously at the Cape Bar and have taken measures to try and assist, but they're in the minority. Despite that hostile and challenging environment, I have managed to get exposure to some good work, interesting work. And it's not consistently, but I have, and I'm grateful. And whenever I have done so, I have given it my all. I always say to the juniors at the Cape Bar, treat your next brief as if it's your last one. Let your work speak for you. As I said as well, the other reason I've managed to sustain a practice is early on in practice, I received assistance, some mentoring. There were people, as I say, who are serious about transformation. And mentoring, the biggest thing about it is just giving a person time. To juniors, people to whom I can just pick up the phone and ask that stupid question. And I had that in my early days of practice. It boils down to that, Chief Justice.
Thank you. Colleagues, may I have the names of those who have questions for the advocate, please?
Nyambi.
Hiya.
Muyimang CJ.
Tete.
Matonsela.
Breitenbach, please, Chief Justice.
Thank you.
Dodovu.
JP, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Firstly, I would like to confirm that Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood has acted for 2 solid terms in the division. This is her 3rd term of acting. On each one of those stints, I invited her to come and act in the division. That I can confirm. Also, I can confirm that to the best of my knowledge, she doesn't have any reserve judgments now. If she does have them, they are less than 3 months old, right? And like the other candidate, I've known her for a long time. I consider her to be my younger sister, and I would like to declare that up front. Other than that, I have no questions for this candidate. Thank you very much, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Honorable JP. Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Advocate, thank you very much for being here. And my first question is what I've been asking everybody today so far, and that is we have a constitution that I'm very proud of, and I'm sure we all are. Within that constitution, we have 3 separate spheres where we have an independent judiciary, we have the executive and the legislative. And my question is, do you think, in our young democracy, do you think that that is still working well? Is there Is there sometimes creep, judicial creep or executive creep across those lines? But I'd like to just hear your comments on our system at the moment, and that you think, is it robust enough? Should there be any changes? What are your opinions?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I think when we discuss the separation of powers question, we must always remind ourselves of where we come from. And we come from a system where there was parliamentary sovereignty, in terms of which Parliament was not accountable to anybody. So it makes sense then that the Constitution should provide checks and balances in terms of which different spheres may constitute checks and balances on the powers of others. On the question of whether it is working or not, I think it's early days. In the light of the context of where we come from, it is still early days. We have chosen a system that provides for constraint, judicial constraint. In other words, where the judiciary is tempted at times, perhaps, to usurp functions, to tell the executive what to do, to tell the legislature what to do, that would not pass constitutional muster. And we've seen that from the case law. Judicial overreach judicial overreach is not permissible. And judicial overreach is when the judiciary tries to usurp the functions of the other spheres. So my sense is it's early days to say whether it's working or not. And I also think, depending on where the nation is at, what's happening, you will find sometimes that there's a perception that one of the spheres is weak, in which instance then one of the other spheres will shine, will appear to be strong, but in a constitutionally permissible manner that is possible. And that's what we're seeing playing out. That would be my answer, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. If I may continue, I first of all want to say congratulations. I see that from your peers and all of the support that you've got, they all seem to be very positive support. So well done on that.
Thank you.
So I would like to ask you a question based on an earlier statement that you made and what you were saying around as a black woman in getting your briefs and not getting sufficient support. What would you say needs to be done to change that? How do we actually fix that as quickly as possible?
So I didn't get the last part. Did you say as quickly as possible? I don't know if I have an answer for that, because the problems we have are multi-laden, I think, and deep-seated, complex issues. I would imagine at the very least, we need to have frank dialogue in the profession. What does privilege mean for this profession? How can we use it positively for the benefit of the profession? Because there are barriers in the profession for people, which some people know nothing about. But the issues in the Western Cape must also be contextualized. The issues at the Cape Bar must be contextualized within the dynamics of the Western Cape. Because we know, for example, that universities graduate en masse from the Cape, from the Western Cape universities. But where do they go? They don't stay there. They go to Gauteng. They come here. And for the profession, we need to look at the statistics, and you will see in Joburg they're far ahead of us in terms of transformation. I know that the Joburg Bar is bigger than the Cape Bar by ×3, but still they have made greater strides, and somehow they've managed to make the Black professionals, African professionals, feel at home. I think practically, we need to look at a system that forces people to mentor people, because it boils down to briefs. We need people to be forced to recommend juniors and say, because every silk, for example, every silk has a stable base of clients, of attorneys. And we know that those attorneys will constantly ask the silk, who would you like to work with? Or who can we brief if you're not available? Those silks, they need to get, I'm making an example, maybe 5 people. And you say to that person, for this whole year, when you get asked who to recommend, you're going to recommend these people. You're going to bring these people into your kind of work. Because there are areas of work where you will never see a Black person involved. One only needs to go to the motion court in the Western Cape Division. I'll be dealing with 100-odd matters, and I will not see one single African person in court, in sight. We have serious problems in the Western Cape. So I think we're beyond the times of leaving things to institutions to deal with, because it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. We now, how many years into democracy? And I can tell you from the statistics, we have in the Cape, Western Cape, in the Cape Bar, we have 16 African females. 16 African females. That's about 1 for every year that I've been there. And if you split the last person, because that's 16 people, I've been there for 15 years. So we have big problems in the Western Cape, and we have left it to the professions to regulate these kind of issues themselves. But in the Western Cape, it is far too slow. Transformation cannot wait for the Cape Bar to catch up with it. And there are measures, I don't want to be misunderstood, there are measures that have been taken. For example, in the Western Cape, now, since last year, people have to, silks have to declare how many juniors they've taken on board. At the end of each year, there's a certificate that they have to fill out and say, I shared fees with so many juniors, I have brought in juniors with so many people. That system is a great start, I think, because it's one of the mechanisms of forcing people to do these things. But I think it's the only thing that can work. Another area we do need to look into is private firms. How come private firms don't brief Black people? Why is that? There's no explanation after so many years. They say things like, we don't know who's there. Are you serious? We in the digital age. You just go on Google. And our directory at the Cape Bar now has a transformation directly. You can literally only look at the directory that gives you African names or that gives you Black people. How can anyone say, I don't know who's there? So it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. So if we were to take measures that, as you say, Commissioner, are urgent, we need to, I think, focus on those 2 aspects. Those are the only 2 things I can think of now. Forcing people to mentor, doing something about private firms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that answer. That's all from me. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Premier. Honorable Nyambi.
Thank you, CJ. Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
In front of us, I see a Black, female, knowledgeable person. Yet, in responding to the question from CJ, you explain the issue of racism and the manner in which you have treated at the Cape Bar. If you can expand on that so that we can make sense and understand out of your practical experience of that racism and the reception that you went through.
I'll give you one example. You said practical, Commissioner. Yes. I'll give you one example, which I consider to be a racist incident. This one actually involves the profession, not just the Cape Bar. This happened about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I'm in the labor court in Cape Town. I'm fully robed. I'm there to argue a motion. I can't remember if it was opposed or not. It's an application. Before the proceedings get underway, I'm in the courtroom. I'm consulting with my client and my attorney. And there are other practitioners in the courtroom as well. word comes that the judge wants to see all the practitioners before the court roll gets underway. And somehow it happens that I'm the last person still sitting in the courtroom consulting with my client and my attorney. And the idea is that we're all going to leave the courtroom, go into the corridor, and then someone is going to come and collect us and take us all together to the judge. So I'm the last one who leaves the courtroom and to enter the corridor. And when I entered the corridor, there were about, let's say about 6 practitioners. They didn't know who I was. They were all white male. I recognized one of them. He's from one of the big firms in town. And without talking to one another, they start converging on me. They start walking towards me, and I start to realize what's going on. And I wait for them to get to me just to make sure. So I said, what? And these 2 young men, the ones closest to me, they said, oh, we thought you were the registrar. I think that's an assumption that when you see an African woman, even not if she's robed just like you, in the court corridors, for a person to just assume that this person doesn't belong, she can't be our colleague. That's how I took that incident.
My last question. In your own words, if you can share with us your understanding of the connection between democracy and the rule of law.
The rule of law is one of our foundational principles in Section 1 of the Constitution. In layman terms, what it means is no one is above the law in our country. What it means is all conduct, all exercise of power must comply with the law. That's it. And the connection to democracy must be obvious because in our Constitution, the Constitution itself says the Constitution is the supreme law of the Republic. And so there is an obvious connection between accounting for power, which is democracy, accounting for power, and accounting to the law.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Honorable Nyambi. The President herself.
CJ. Good afternoon, Ms. Mangcu-Lockwood.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I'm sorry about your daughter. To get to business, I'm listening to you tell the sad tale of a Black female practitioner at the bar, and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, this is exactly what I experienced back in the day, in the 90s, when I was still in practice.
Yeah.
And we are still talking about this now. Here we have you, a clearly competent lawyer, but you are not getting, the recognition you deserve. Can I ask you this? Are you not tired of being asked what can be done so that you get briefs? Because I am. Should women still be asked what measures should be implemented so that the discrimination against them stops? Is that a fair question? Does it make sense to you?
I don't think it's completely unfair. It is exhausting, let me put it that way, but it's not completely unfair because we also need to contribute to the solutions from the perspective of our own experiences. The solutions need to meet the problems that we do highlight, and they need to hit them on the spot and not be on the periphery. So I do understand, from that point of view, I do understand the question. But yes, it's exhausting to still be talking about these things in 2021. It's so 90s, as you say, President.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you'll forgive me my exasperation, but I think it's unfair to be asked that, because this question has been asked over and over and over and over, and we've given all these answers. What you just said now is nothing new. It's been said a zillion times before,
Yes.
but the question is still asked and nothing is happening to remedy the situation. But that said, Ms. Mano, I just, why have you not taken silk? Or is the answer obvious?
Maybe it is obvious to you, but for me, once I acted, Commissioner, once I'd acted, I didn't want it. I wanted to come to the bench. Once I acted, I knew, I clicked in, and I just knew this was a calling I needed to answer to. So I went back to my practice. It was just a matter of time, I should say, after I'd acted the first time. I went back to practice thinking, when should I go apply to go to the bench? I could go later. I didn't have a plan about it, but I went back to practice, and every month I was thinking, I was reviewing my decision not to be making myself available to act. And I knew that I had moved on. Something in me had shifted. And so in that context, it didn't make sense to apply for silk. I don't need silk to go to the bench. That's my answer.
True that. Well,
true that.
No, it makes perfect sense, and actually it resonates, because the same thing happened to me, and incidentally, I went to act in that very division, the Cape High Court, and the bug bit, and I never went back to practice. Just one concern I have. I want you to tell me a little bit about Olive Trust, which you have declared you would not be keen to abandon, at least in its infancy.
Yes.
First, what is it about?
The Olive Trust is a trust that I started thinking about even last year. It was actually as a response to COVID. And when I heard that the schools were closing down, I started thinking about Ginsberg, where I come from, Ginsberg, Ekonge, Eastern Cape. And I
I grew up there.
Oh, right.
Where in Zwelitsha.
Oh, yes. And when I started hearing schools are going virtual, and I thought, Ginsberg, I can't picture that happening. Schools don't have computers in Ginsberg. So that's how this thing started. And I thought, what can I do for Ginsberg? And I traveled as soon as I could travel after level 5 restrictions. I traveled to the Eastern Cape. I met up with some school principals. And the first thing I thought I'm able to do is to raise funding and provide some kind of scholarship for the kids, for some of the kids, bring out the strongest kids academically, and award a scholarship for them to go to a school that I also got to go to in town, Ekonge. And in order to do that, the plan is to put my own money in, but also to raise funding so that we can take more kids and undertake more efforts, educational efforts for specifically for Ginsberg. So that's why it was started. Unfortunately, because of COVID, there were a lot of delays. So the registration of the trust was actually only effected this year in January. And we've had more delays. One of the school principals I spoke to unfortunately passed away. One of the teachers I was dealing with there, she lost her father, then she lost her brother. So we have incurred a lot of delays, but it is a project that's very close to my heart, and which is the reason in my form I have said I would like to continue with it. I wouldn't be receiving any remuneration for it. It's purely to raise funding to assist the kids. Thank you, President, Commissioner.
Okay, and here's my concern. Who is or are the trustees? Because I'm thinking of a situation where, Lord forbid, the trust would have to litigate. It happens, and here you are a judge smack bang in the heart of that litigation.
I see. The trustees are here. The work of the trust would be in the Eastern Cape, but the trustees, I'm one of the trustees. The trustees are in, sorry, when I say here, I'm in the Western Cape. Sorry, we in Gauteng now. The trustees are based in the Western Cape, and I'm one of them. But the work of the trust would be in the Eastern Cape, which is why I thought there wouldn't be any issues. But if the commission feels that there would be serious problems, it will break my heart, but we haven't gone very far. I would have to reconsider the decision.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Mangcu. Thank you, CJ.
Follow up, Chief Justice.
Yes, Commissioner Singh.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Mangcu. I can see that this trust is very close, near and dear to your heart, and very noble intentions. Will it not be possible for you to get others to continue this good work whilst you still give it moral support and other kind financial support as well?
Yes, absolutely. I take that counsel, and I think I might well have to do that. I mean, you're right. You're right. I could still be involved from the sidelines, as it were.
No, thank you very much. And Chief Justice, will that be allowed? Just to ask the Chief Justice. If somebody is on the sidelines, a judge supporting, moral support, financial support.
No, she must just share the vision with somebody with someone, make sure that the person understands the vision well and step out completely. Her role can be to contribute money, but not expose herself to the possibility of somebody contributing to the trust and then turning around and saying, when he or she has a gain, I'm the one who contributed so much to the trust. So there could be potential conflict there. Just explain the vision clearly and step aside and just donate. Don't get involved in the running of this thing. It could compromise you.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Chief Justice, the other thing is I'm very pleased to note that under memberships, Ms. Mangcu used to be a director of an organization called Dangerous Football Association, and it's no longer in existence. Well, I don't know why it was called Dangerous Football Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Muimang.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Mangcu-Lockwood.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, I see you.
In your questionnaire, you may I think it's on page 18, 19 of book 2 of book 2. Those books that are sitting next to you.
Right.
Yeah, book 2 of book 2, page 18 and 19.
Yes.
You indicate that you appeared in a number of cases. One of them is the Nesta.
Yes.
President versus the President of the Republic of South Africa. From your reflection, do you think the current structure of the Hawks reflects the thrust of the issues that you were canvassing as part of the teams, right from disestablishing the Scorpion and right up to the formation of the Hawks? Thank you.
Do I think the current structure of the Hawks, sorry, is what? Sorry, Commissioner, I didn't get the point.
Do you think that the progress thus far that we have made with regard to strengthening the Hawks mirrors the thrust of the issues that you were canvassing in that case?
It's a tough one because I don't know the inner workings, the current workings of the Hawks, and I actually I don't really want to comment on whether their structure works or not, because, you know, one day a matter involving the Hawks may well come to me, and someone might be challenging that, and I would have to determine whether or not it's constitutionally compliant or complies with the rule of law. But, you know, as I'm sure you know, in Glenister, we never got to see the light of day in the team that you're mentioning, that I was part of, because, as you know, the Constitutional Court didn't really want to engage on those issues of the Constitution, the complement of the Scorpions vis-a-vis the SAPs, and the issue there became separation of powers, and the court said it's not up to us to intervene at this stage. The court decided to respect separation of powers there, as you know, as well. So those issues, they weren't actually well canvassed in that case, which is why I can't answer fully. I can't answer your question fully for that reason.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chief Justice JP Mlambo here. I've got a follow-up to
Thank you so much.
the question.
Is there a follow-up, JP?
Not to this question, CJ, but to the one by Commissioner Nyambi, but I'm prepared to wait my turn and raise the issue.
Okay, sir. Okay, all right. Commissioner Tsepe?
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
CJ, may I declare now that I know Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood. I feel very old. When I was in the managing the firm, or in the management committee of the firm, Cheadle, Thompson and Haysom, she was a candidate attorney at the time. And so the firm, she did very well when she was at the firm. I just thought I should declare that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I just wanted to find out from you, what other adjudicative roles have you played other than acting as a judge at the High Court, which in your view would help you fulfill your role as a judge were you to be appointed?
Thank you, Commissioner. I have, over the years, I've presided as chairperson over mediation proceedings, over arbitration proceedings, over disciplinary proceedings as well. I've also sat as an assessor in some long-running criminal trials, which, although they're not adjudicative, but at least the role is to assist the judge in the High Court, that was.
Thank you. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you so much, man. Prof?
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Would you mind sharing your judicial philosophy with the Commission?
Judicial philosophy. You know, at university, they told us all about judicial philosophy. Conservatism, you can come to the bench as a conservative, you can come as a judicial activist, constructionist, whatever view you want to take. Ultimately, the Constitution tells us to comply with the Constitution and rule of law. That becomes the philosophy when you come to the bench. So I can't take it further than that. I acknowledge that we all come to the bench from all walks of life, having had all sorts of experiences, coming with our values and worldviews. But when we get there, the Constitution is the barometer for all of us. Rule of law, barometer for all of us. As activist as I want to be as a judicial officer, the Constitution and the rule of law, they limit my ability to do that. In other words, I must walk that fine line, no matter what it is that I believe in. So I believe there's a new judicial philosophy in town. That's the Constitution and the rule of law.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chief Justice.
CJ, follow up.
Thank you. Is that Honorable Malema?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Advocate, she asked you about your own judicial philosophy. Please give us that. Your own.
My own?
As you sit there on the bench, what informs your judicial philosophy? That's what she's asking you about, not what they taught you at school. Your own.
Thank you, Commissioner. My own philosophy is that when a judicial officer presides over a matter, they must apply the Constitution. When we develop Section 39 sub 2, when we develop the law, common law, when we develop the customary law, when interpreting any legislation, we must do it in a manner that promotes the spirit, purport, and objects of the Bill of Rights. That's my philosophy. That's what I follow.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you. Thank you. Advocate Madonsela C.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
In your earlier explanation of your background and where you come from, it appears to me that you or your husband are very much involved in the church. And if I'm correct on that premise, I just want to find out if your husband's involvement in the church or yours, is it ecclesiastical or merely evangelistical?
It's a tough one to explain because, you know, when we went to Wales, for example, I referred to that example. My husband went to assist the Presbyterian Church in Wales. And we've also attended evangelical churches as well. It's very difficult to confine us to either or. We believe in Christian values. We believe in many churches forming one church. That's the difficulty I'm having with the question.
Yeah. Now, but let me just put it this way: in South Africa now, you're back.
Yes.
In Cape Town, where you are.
Yes.
Are you still highly involved in the church administration?
Yes, we belong to a church. That's right.
I mean, are you at the helm of the church administration? Are you involved?
Yes,
in
I'm very involved in church. Yes.
Now, I asked because where I come from,
yes,
in KZN, one of the things that an advocate gets baptized into when he is a practitioner are actually church disputes.
Sorry, church?
Church disputes. You know,
right.
You know, the churches go to court.
Yes.
On a very regular basis.
Mm.
And in those cases, churches seem not to let go when they fight. Church members don't let go when they fight with each other and they go to court, and those cases go to court all over the country. I mean, one of them is in the Constitutional Court, as we speak, from my division. So I just want to find out is that not a potential problem that might arise? Don't you think it will arise? What do you think about it?
I haven't thought conflict might arise simply because I'm a church-going person, and a matter involved.
No, not from that perspective. From the perspective that a matter might come, or a dispute might arise, and how you do deal with it if it arises.
Well, I mean, if, for example, a matter came involving a church that I have been involved with or I am involved with, then I'd clearly have to recuse myself, because a judicial officer has to recuse themselves if there is a perceived or actual conflict of interest, or if there's a reasonable suspicion of bias based on objective facts. And one must always apply those kind of principles. Beyond that, I wouldn't just recuse myself because a matter involved church-going people.
No, my second question has been covered by Commissioner Singh. It had to do with the Dangerous Football Association as well. I must say on this note that I've just recently moved my support from Kaizer Chiefs to Amazulu Football Club because of dangerous footballing. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Breitenbach.
Justice, did you forget about me?
Oh,
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Whose voice was it?
Magwanisha.
Oh, I didn't even have you. Sorry, Honorable Magwanisha. Go ahead, Honorable Breitenbach.
I'm happy to let the Honorable Magwanisha go ahead of me.
Oh, go ahead, Honorable Magwanisha.
Thank you very much, Honorable Breitenbach. Thank you very much, CJ. Good afternoon, Advocate.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I would like to go back to 2002 to 2004.
Right.
You say one of your duties was to brief counsels for
Yes.
both the Labour Court and the High Court.
Yes. When I was an attorney,
Yes.
which was 2020,
Yes,
some appearances I made myself, but yes, I briefed counsel to go to the High Court and the Labour Court.
Yes. How many women and black advocates did you brief?
I don't know how many, but I can tell you that most of the people I did get to brief were, at that stage, they were female colored people. There were no African females when I was an attorney at the Cape Bar.
That's fine. My second one, because I think we must be fast. My second one, since you are now at the bar, and the MD of your former firm has said that you are a very good candidate attorney, have you received any work consistently from the firm?
From her firm?
Chidl, Thompson and Hayson.
I have since resigned.
That's a good answer because
the question still stands.
My answer is mostly not. Mostly not. When I came to the bar, I did hope I'd receive a lot of work from them. I didn't. They did start briefing me later on, but later on, I mean maybe 4th, 5th year. But I did hope they would brief me, but I also knew the reality of that practice, of that firm at least, because they were a specialist firm and they tended to do most of the work themselves. So they only briefed when there was no capacity within the firm. And if they did do brief, they would only brief senior people. So I did hope for briefs from them, but realistically speaking, I didn't think it would happen. And indeed, it hardly did happen.
Thank you. My last one, did you find the English bar to be difficult when you wrote the exams?
Oh, the exam itself, I didn't. The hardest thing about that exam was that I was in my 40s when I wrote it. And I can tell you, my brain was not interested in the detail of being a law student again. But in terms of the content, I wasn't intimidated by it. It wasn't more intimidating than the bar in South Africa, for example. The hardest thing was that. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much, CJ. Thank you, Honorable Breitenbach.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Breitenbach.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Madam.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I haven't looked at how old you are, and if you say you were in your 40s when you wrote that exam, it must obviously mean you're older than 40 now, but you look around 30, so I'm having trouble with that concept. You did your articles at Cheadle, Thompson and Haysom, which is a pretty good place to be. I presume there you learned very quickly to speak truth to power.
Yes, you may presume so. Yes, thank you.
My question is this: in South Africa, our constitution is paramount, and we must give effect to it. So what are your views with regard to a judicial officer who has been found guilty of gross misconduct linked to underlying dishonesty, continuing to sit on the bench?
Sorry, I didn't get all of that. What are my views on
with regard to a judicial officer who has been found guilty of gross misconduct linked to underlying dishonesty, continuing to sit on the bench?
As far as I understand the process, what's happened so far is a recommendation has been made. And this commission...
May I interrupt you? I'm very, very sorry. May I interrupt you? I'm sorry. It's not a question about the Judge President of the Western Cape. It's a general question. What is your view with regards to a judicial officer who has been found guilty of gross misconduct linked to underlying dishonesty, continuing to sit on the bench? Any judicial officer, any conviction, any bench.
Well, it's relevant what stage the process is at.
Yes.
Because in terms of our system, the tribunal makes a recommendation and the commission must still choose whether or not it approves it. And even then, a constitutional process of impeachment must be followed in terms of 177 of the Constitution. And so, depending on where you are in the process, just because there's a recommendation that says a person has been found of gross misconduct, it doesn't mean the person must stop sitting, because what if the commission does not approve the recommendation? What if the charges are not upheld? So it depends where the process is at. If we were at a stage where the National Assembly had now exhausted its processes, in terms of the Constitution, that's the end of the process. But even then, there may well be court processes, I don't know. So early days before, well, sorry, I keep going back to specifics, but you saying that it's a theoretical question. The answer surely must be that it depends where the process is at, because the other thing to consider is we have their rights to dignity for people. Even judicial officers have right to human dignity. There are also rights to fair processes as well. So we need to let the processes unfold to their conclusion. That's in terms of the Constitution.
Thank you. It's probably a better answer than anyone else has given this far. But my question remains, should they continue to sit on the bench while this process unfolds? What is the purpose of suspension?
Well, it's not, I mean, has the person been suspended?
No.
Because, I mean, surely that would play a role. If the person were suspended and they continued to sit on the bench, then we might have to have a discussion about that.
No, that's not the question, and I know you're smart enough to know that. What is the purpose of suspension?
Sorry, then I think I'm missing your question, because I thought you were asking me, should a person continue to sit on the bench if there are findings of gross misconduct against them?
Yes, that is the question, and you've answered it.
Yeah.
My second question is, what would be the purpose of the process of suspension, given your answer?
What would be the purpose of suspension?
The process of suspension, given your answer.
The process of suspension is also up to the commission and then the minister, as I understand it. And the minister may decide to suspend. That's also in terms of the Constitution. The purpose is the process.
Thank you.
CJ, can I make a follow-up, because this question has been troubling us here?
Please do so.
Now, advocate, in a democratic society and a country where people claim to uphold the constitution when it favors them. And when confronted with difficult questions like the one you were asked about earlier on, what becomes the most acceptable solution? Is it political expediency or a due process?
In an instance where
That question they asked you.
this last one,
No, the first question, where they say a person in the bench has been found guilty of a gross misconduct, right? And we become so excited that the person has been found guilty. What needs to be followed? Is it a political expediency or a due process? And if it's a due process, what does the due process include?
I would say due process.
Yeah.
And that is in terms of the process, the act, the JSC Act, and in terms of the Constitution. And as I said earlier on, as I understand the process, the next step is that the Commission must decide whether or not it's upholding that recommendation. That's a due process issue, not political expediency. And then the next thing is the National Assembly process. Now, it may well be argued that that part of the process is political because politicians must vote on that. Maybe the answer is both, Commissioner, that there's due process and then politics at that point. I don't know if I'm...
No, I agree. Politics will come.
Right.
Now, what does it do to our democracy when a due process is not followed? So when people are found guilty of a gross misconduct, and for political expediency, we don't follow the due process. What will that do to our democracy? Where there's no due process, we act out of the feelings of a certain quarters of society. What does it do to the rule of law? What does it do to the right to dignity? What does it do to the Constitution itself, which encourages the due process?
It does violence to those things. And I think it would probably, if those were the circumstances, someone might well run to court and say, force them to follow due process. But until that happens, as long as the processes are being followed, there's no reason on which to get excited that someone should be taken out of the process.
Absolutely. There's no need for excitement. Thank you.
Chief Justice, it's Madonsela. To follow up, I just want to say that the reality of the questions which come from Commissioner Brettenbach, which have
is there a question, Advocate Madonsela, or is it a comment?
It's a comment followed by a question.
Let's just try to put questions to her.
Follow-up question?
Put your question, sir. Put your question, Advocate Madonsela. I'm trying to avoid a situation where you make a statement and she now feel that it's necessary for her to make a statement. Just put your question, even if it challenges what she said. But at least let it be a question that the candidate can answer.
Is it correct for a commissioner in the Judicial Service Commission who may very well be a decision maker on the findings of about a judicial officer to postulate a situation in which a decision he or she may make in a matter which will come before him or her to say, to preempt that outcome? Would it be correct to do that?
I think I I lost concentration early on in your question. There's so much theory in it. Please ask it again. I'm
Well,
really
I think
sorry.
we're talking in parables in this
Yes.
in this commission. That's a problem.
So if you don't mind,
Is it correct for a commissioner
yes.
who might ultimately be seized with the findings of a disciplinary committee
Yes.
concerning a judicial officer to postulate an outcome that might very well be reached by him or her when he ultimately considers the matter?
The question, I see. I'm sure commissioners are allowed to express themselves. Whether or not those, how they're going to decide in due course is communicated beforehand. Is that necessarily wrong? I don't know. That's up to this commission's rules of conducting themselves.
That not be tantamount to prejudging the matter.
Yes, it definitely is that. But I wonder if the commission's processes don't allow for a person to change their mind as the process unfolds. In other words, we might be getting a certain question today at the interviews, but when the commission eventually sits, a person might well have changed their minds. So it's difficult for me to say now that the person has an opinion. It's very similar to court. You start proceedings and you've got a prima facie view of the matter, but as it unfolds, well, you've changed your mind. The difference is the person has made it, is quite emphatic about which route they might take. Well, the commission might want to take a view on that.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Was there someone who wanted a follow-up, or may I proceed?
Yes, Chief Justice.
Was it Honorable Moemang? I couldn't make out who it was.
Sir Xaba was following on
Okay.
Commissioner
Yes,
Malema's question.
yes, Honorable Xaba.
Is it your position that political expediency that does not follow due legal process violates the principle all is equal before the law?
It might well do. That's my answer.
Thank you.
Honorable Dodovu.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Advocate.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good. Very, very quick. And my question is going to be a metaphor. Have you ever seen two elephants fighting?
I think only on video, not live.
Yes. They fight.
Right.
What do you think happens when the two elephants fight?
Dust, chaos.
Yes, there is a proverb that says where two elephants fight, the grass suffers.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
In your case, what will you do if you can see two elephants fighting?
Run.
Now, in this case, I follow this matter quite differently. Therefore, based on what you say, is it fair for legal practitioners to be dragged into a matter that is not theirs? In that sense, for example, where two elephants are fighting, or where two individuals are fighting, or whether affections or what?
Commissioner Dodovu, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yes.
Please pardon me.
Okay.
Just in line with our agreement and undertaking and the mandate you've given me to interrupt all of you
No problem.
without feeling embarrassed. Please test their suitability, sir.
Yes, yes, it's okay. My question is, in case that there are two people or two groups or two factions fighting, is it fair to drag other people who are not part of that fight?
No, it's not fair, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Dodovu. Honorable JP Mlambo.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is in response to, or a follow-up to the questions by Commissioner Nyambi. It's just to test your resilience as a judicial officer since you are applying for that position. You've described that incident in the labor court, but have you, sitting as an acting judge, encountered problems of an attitudinal nature from people who are your seniors at the bar, just appearing before you as a junior judge? And let me give you an example. One incident where a judge was allocated to a matter became unavailable.
Right.
The matter was allocated to another judge who happens to be female and black. Counsel came to introduce themselves, saw her, greeted, said nothing, went back to court. When she got to court, they said, Judge, you'll be pleased to know that we've agreed to go to mediation. So I'm just giving you that background to understand whether you've had incidents like that, either sitting, presiding, and getting negative vibes towards you by people who are your seniors, and how you dealt with that. That's all I'm asking.
Personally, no, Commissioner. I mean, I had one matter in which I thought there were two silks on either side, and the matter was quite heightened. You know, it was urgent, and they were fighting about everything, even about whether to come and see me. You know, I found the behavior of the one counsel in particular to be quite insolent, but he was insolent to everyone, so I didn't take it personally. But I have heard of incidents of people deciding to take matters to arbitration, for example, because an African judicial officer has been appointed to preside over the matter. I've heard of incidents of parties, disrespecting female Africans and females on the bench as well. But me personally, no.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Judge President. As we part, Advocate Mangcu-Lockwood, you seem to be enjoying this interview. Just make notes so that you can include it in your biography. You're excused.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Thank you, Commissioners. I will do. Thank you.